Under a church in my local town, there is this green door covering with no handle, because it's a wooden, real fake door. Legit though, it's a door with no hinges. It's meant to just stop access into there. I'd like to mention the door is on the back side of the church, and outside the church grounds. There's no road near it. One day, me and my mates saw someone had smashed the wooden door thing to pieces. As typical teenagers, we wanted to explore, but me being me, I said we should research it. In our town, there are quite a lot of tunnels linking houses and shops that are usually chained off, but a lot of them are still open and haven't been explored. This was the first time when we wouldn't have to ask a shop owner to have a look. I found that they were apparently all of these ghosts, including the Blue Drum Boy, who got killed during a war in the early 11th century. My friend believes in all the paranormal stuff, so he got his cross and ghost shit ready. I packed a 500 lumen torch to light up the place and had a pack of batteries spare, as well as a walkie-talkie and all the other essentials. It was the early hours and pitch black, and we went in. Everyone was completely silent as we crept down the stairs, and suddenly we realized there was a 90-degree turn where we couldn't see the right. Everyone was scared shitless to go down first, so my mate lit a red flare and threw it in. Then we all walked in together. There was this huge room with another doorway. We looked around the first room, finding needles and blood. We carried on through the doorway and found a grate that had a ladder off it. Obviously we were buzzing and thought, what a great idea to cut through the lock and climb down the ladder. 3 out of the 4 of us were down when the largest of us all started climbing. It was rickety and kind of rusted, and it broke when he was halfway. The exit from the ladder was a tunnel, completely dry and pitch black, but he fell and shattered both ankles. Oh, and there was a bad stench. Yeah, bad situation as we couldn't get back up the ladder, and my mate couldn't walk, and he was the biggest guy, so we had to carry him. Basically, when me and one other mate carried on, leaving the others to find help as the walkie-talkies got no reply, we walked past rotting rat corpses, live rats, and a shit ton of blood stains. After about 30 minutes of walking, after about a mile, we found a crossroad. Straight, left, or right. Basically, left was a dead end, right was a dead end, and straight had a ladder. The ladder was rusted, and we were scared to climb it, but I climbed it, and found someone with a needle in their arm, dead. Their face was rotting, and I was about to be sick. The ladder led to identical rooms, but no lock on their grate. I went back down the ladder, got the others to come back, and we managed to get my large mate up and out and took him to the hospital. We couldn't say where we went or talk about the dead guy, because we knew it would be trespassing. Me and a few good friends decided to explore this abandoned child's hospital that we heard about that was in a small village about an hour away from us. We get there, and it's this huge plot of land, trees surrounding the whole place, and the building in the center. It looked extremely creepy. We had to climb up the wall to get inside, as we couldn't get in on the ground floor, and we had to go through a window that was ajar. After climbing through, the place was a mess. Rubble everywhere, but it looked completely desolate, as if no one had been inside for years. So anyway, we went straight up to the roof, sat, and had a few beers and then went home. I decided to go back a few days later with my girlfriend to have a proper look around because I wanted to explore it. We went into the building and immediately there was a very different vibe unlike the other night. We jumped over the broken staircase to get to the ground floor, and this was next to a large, heavy-duty wooden door with multiple bolts and chains over it, and found a trap door with a ladder underneath it which led into the basement. I convinced my girlfriend to come with me, but she wouldn't explore the basement when we were there, just stayed at the bottom of the ladder with her torch while I had a quick look around. This is when it got really scary. I walked past some machines in the small room, which was completely empty, with the exception of a kicked-over chair and a noose hanging from a pipe directly above my chair. I shat myself and turned around to leave, when on the wall there was red graffiti, saying, "Don't come back." Needless to say, I haven't been back. My girlfriend told me after that she felt I was gone for about an hour, when I knew I was only gone for about 5 to 10 minutes. And she told me that she kept hearing whispers from the dark corridors, and the trapdoor fell shut above her at one point for no apparent reason. It was a very scary place, and I would love to go back with more people, but damn, that shit absolutely terrified me. This happened 8 years ago, when I was a sophomore in high school. My urban exploration friends and I went on a bike ride looking for cool places to explore in a relatively dilapidated area, when we discovered a really creepy cave, which turned out to be an old abandoned cement mine. We did some mild exploring that first day, but quickly realized it would require more gear to go through to explore, including flashlights and respirators. About a week later, the 5 of us came back with the proper gear and a camera to see what we could find in the mine. We discovered there was basically one main shaft that sloped downwards and deeper into the earth, so we followed that main route. It was wide enough for a car to drive down and was pretty well graded, so the walking was easy. There were many rooms, old machinery, and rusting equipment off this main shaft, but we mostly avoided it in the beginning. We were trying not to get lost or confused. Along the way, the walls were littered with the classic abandoned graffiti. Simon was here. Swastikas, initials, dates, the typical phallic drawings, and more. As we got deeper and deeper though, the graffiti really thinned out. At this point, the light from the entrance was long gone, and we were relying solely on flashlights. The air was so stagnant and hazy, with particles, that the light from our flimsy flashlights would only go 20 feet or so before getting totally obscured by dust. Thank goodness for the respirators. The glow sticks we had bought to mark our way to prevent getting lost were also basically useless, because they would disappear into the haze only a few steps after dropping them, and we had only bought about 10 or so. At this point, we started arguing amongst ourselves. Several of the crew were nervous about going any deeper, with the air quality becoming so terrible, and without a good way to prevent us from getting lost. We were probably a quarter of a mile into the earth now, and the rest of us managed to override that sentiment of fear by assuring them that the path was easy and straightforward, so we would have to try to get lost. We were going to rely on our level-headedness, sense of direction, and flashlight battery to get out. Despite the agreement to push on, it was becoming very creepy for everyone. We walked for a while in silence, hearing nothing but our own movements and the steady drip of water coming from somewhere deep within the cave. I think we were all pretty scared at this point, but no longer willing to admit it to each other. Then we stumbled across something that made us stop cold. Dug into the side of the deep stone shaft we were slowly descending was a tunnel, an offshoot. It was narrow. You'd have to crouch to go through it. It was also a good few feet off the ground, so required a scramble to reach it. But that wasn't what made us stop. It was the graffiti. We hadn't seen any for about 10 minutes or so we had assumed that the artists never came this far. But someone else clearly had a message, and they left it very ominously. The tunnel was lined with words written in white, all of them somehow reflecting to death and destruction. Scrawled through the tunnel were words like suffering, pain, plague, disease, and hell. It was pretty terrifying. Who else would come this far just to write such a terrible message in a mysterious tunnel that broke from the main path? But there was no turning back now. We had to see where the tunnel led to. Despite our fear, we were overpowered by intense curiosity. So one by one, we crawled through the tunnel to see the other side. What we found was a strange flooded chamber. Around a pool of water, there were many large stones, each covered with dozens of burnt-out tea candles. There must have been hundreds of used tea candles in the place. The walls had a few creepy monster faces poorly graffitied on them, and the tunnel entrance back to the main shaft was ringed and spray-painted with a blood-stained mouth. What is this place? Some weird ritual site for local Satan worshippers? An elaborate hoax set out by some kids? Or just some creative artwork? We couldn't find much evidence to figure out what it was, and we were running out of adrenaline to keep exploring. We all crawled out of there and made our way back to the main shaft, where we promptly headed towards the exit. When we finally saw that pinprick of natural light coming from the real world outside, we were flooded with relief. We never did figure out what the mysterious cavern was for, and I think I'm content to leave it a mystery. No, we didn't hear any monsters in the depths of the tunnel, or find any Satan worshippers covered in blood. But just finding that room, buried deep in an old forgotten mine, was enough to creep the hell out of us for a very long time. We went to an abandoned hospital. There was a large square staircase spiraling up to the roof of the outside of the building. Locked steel door at the bottom, so the only way up was to climb on the outside up to the first landing. My buddy boosts me up. I climb over, and there's a sleeping bag with a steak knife next to it on the landing. I call down, we're definitely not alone here, dude. No, but it's cool, says a voice behind me, scaring the literal shit out of me and causing me to jump and whirl around. There's a young, dirty, homeless-looking guy standing there, coming down the stairs from above. Hands up, palms out. I didn't mean to scare you. He takes a seat on the stairs, so I carefully step onto the handle of the little steak knife, lean over the edge, and pull my friend up. We had planned to sit on the roof and drink beer, so we offer the homeless guy a beer, which he gratefully accepts, and we shoot the shit on the landing for a while. We were talking about the city, the cops, traveling, and life in general. He tells us that he's basically a drifter and has been in town for about a week or so, but a nice guy. Things are going pretty well, when all of a sudden he asks, "You guys are human, right?" I hate it when I meet people that end up being aliens, and you never know until you peel their skin off. They've been after me a long time, you know. They don't stop. They never stop. Sometimes I think I should just kill everyone, to be safe. He's definitely not joking. There's an uncomfortable silence as my friend and I realize this guy is genuinely batshit. Yeah, man, we're human. We just wanted to check out this place and drink some beer. We're gonna go and make a move now, though. We definitely don't want to be any trouble. He just stares in silence, so we leave him the last beer, carefully backing up the railing, jumping down and walking away, very quickly, constantly looking back over our shoulders. The entire time, he's just standing there, still and silent, watching us leave. This place is still abandoned. At least in the last 5 years it has been, and we've never been back. I'm not a believer in the supernatural, but humans can be deceptive and dangerous in ways that you can't see coming. I used to be a security supervisor at a hospital with an abandoned old hospital on site. We had to do walkthroughs, and I worked the graveyard shift. The place was creepy cool. I felt a bit like an urban explorer, but creepy nonetheless. It was like something out of 28 Days Later. Some lights worked, others didn't. Others still just flickered. So I'd be walking down a hallway with some pitch black rooms on either side, in a section where the hallway lights were out, and the next section, the hallway lights were flickering. I always felt like a hobo could be chilling in a room and have me at the disadvantage, as I'm loud, with keys, a flashlight, and a radio, and I always felt uneasy. On this one occasion, I showed up at midnight and saw the whole top floor of the hospital had every working light turned on. The split shift supervisor told me that he had called the maintenance guy, as they were the only other people with keys, and they hadn't been up there. He said it happened around 11, and he was putting it off for me to handle. Place stood out like a beacon across the whole hospital grounds, so I grabbed one of my guys and went up, and we walked together and turned it all back off. We didn't find a soul, but they could have duped us or swapped to a different floor. Only part of the abandoned hospital that's still in use is the psych ward. One time, The nurses called complaining about people moving furniture above them on the abandoned floor. So I went up and found the place a mess, but I didn't see anyone. We went down to tell them, and they saw up and down that it was loud and there was a lot of noise. One time, I was walking through the old ICU. No lights in the whole place, except one side hallway, and it flickered. So I'm walking up, uneasy as usual, and I'm walking past the side hall, and the lights flick on. To my left is a bloody man in a chair, and I damn near shat myself. Lights flipped off, and then when it came back on, I saw it was a mannequin, or CPR dummy I think, covered in some red paint, that was propped up on the chair. Turns out, some cops asked to see the haunted hospital the shift before, and thought it would be funny to set that damned thing up there for me. Lots of other incidents, like guards reporting hearing babies cry when there were none, doors opening independently, swiveling chairs start swiveling by themselves. It didn't happen to me personally, but we did like to mess with them when they were up there and yell into the mic every now and again. Makes you jump when you're quietly going through that hauntingly empty place. There is an abandoned East Coast insane asylum that I've often seen posted on YouTube, as well as other places on the internet. I personally have been there around 10 or 15 times over the course of a decade, and each time I found something new, as the complex is very spread out and very massive. What I've never seen posted or never mentioned, however, is the maze of tunnels underneath the complex. Connecting each building is a subterranean network of tunnels for steam, water, sewage, and electricity. The tunnels are roughly 10 to 15 feet underground and quite long. They lead into the basement of each structure in a portion of the complex, with an emergency escape hatch that leads out into the woods between buildings in a portion. One weird thing is that most of the entrances to the tunnel system are hidden in the walls. I exited through a door once and found myself in a room that was the complex's post office, where I'd literally been 5 times before and had never noticed that there was a hidden passage integrated into the wooden paneling. The complex has been abandoned for 20 to 30 years, so parts of the tunnel are very wet with leaking water. When you're down in there, you constantly hear environmental noise, as well as echoes from your own movements. There is nothing reflective down there, and there are no outside sources of light. If you don't have a bright enough flashlight, it can get kind of difficult to make out features of things in the distance, and you're relying a lot upon the slight tonal differences of what you can see to determine what something is off in the distance before you're right up onto it. If you go out on a moonless night and shine an LED pen light against a concrete wall from 15 feet away, you would get an idea from what I'm talking about. Now, for the terror. First of all, I have a stupid habit of going into these places by myself. I've recently started correcting this, because you never know when an accident could happen, leaving you alone underground in the dark. The last time I was in the tunnels, I was by myself, with a single AA battery-powered 75 to 100 lumen LED flashlight. My second mistake was that during this excursion, I decided to follow the tunnel down to what I thought was the water treatment building for the complex. The tunnel slopes downwards, so the leaking water previously mentioned runs down and collects at the tunnel's end. So at the end of the tunnel, I enter this large room with two 15-foot tall water storage tanks. There is probably an inch of water and muck on the floor, which makes a really gross noise when you walk in it. I am still standing, looking around with my flashlight, and from the opposite side of the room, I hear it. There is someone else in this underground room with me. I shine my flashlight across the room. I don't see anything, but I keep hearing the wet footprints. All of a sudden, I shine the light on this human-shaped object that is just black. There is no difference in shading or anything, just like a shadow against the peach-colored concrete wall. I stammer out, "Hello?" And all of a sudden, I can see these persons' two eyes flash up, reflecting back my flashlight. But that's it. I don't know if the person was in a guile suit or what, but it was impossible to make out anything distinguishable. I don't know what kind of weirdo sets out in full black get-up to rummage around underground. So at this point I flip out. I spin 180 degrees on my heels and bolt. I'm flying up the inclined tunnel, slipping and sliding all over the place on the damn concrete. I fell a handful of times, sprained my wrist badly, and got a number of cuts on my one knee. That run through the underground tunnels felt like an eternity. If you've ever seen the subway scene from the movie 28 Weeks Later, that's the closest thing I can approximate to. It was the closest thing I've ever experienced to a living nightmare. I have never been so terrified in all my life. Looking back, I'm sure whoever I met down there in the dark was probably as terrified as I was, unless they were crazy as hell. I have no reason to believe they followed me, and they probably ran back the way they came, as did I. I noticed that they didn't have a flashlight on. So what I think probably happened is that they had noticed my light and pulled a hoodie up over their head, turned off their light, and tried to hide as best they could. We were kids exploring an underground flood channel. There were spots we would climb up and dangle our arms out of the storm drains on the street, but that required crawling up weird diagonal tunnels. There were 4 of us, and we were about 12 years old, with one flashlight. The walls were all graffitied with a lot of gang stuff, and even warnings to turn back. We just took it, as other kids that were bored. We got to the spot where the ceiling angled down quite low, to the point the opening was so small we had to crawl to continue. Challenge accepted. It looked like it opened up again shortly, so we crawled through 5 to 6 feet of the low area, and when it opened back up, it looked like we were in a large round concrete pipe, with still lots of graffiti. We started yelling and playing with the echoes. Then we thought we heard something, so we got quiet. And then, really loudly, a boom came from the darkness. Someone shouted, "You are all going to die." And we heard this person running. The kid with the flashlight ran so fast, and the rest of us were left in absolute darkness. This was the first time we went past the low spot, but the last time we went down there. None of us died that day. The rest of us ended up quietly and slowly walking out in the dark. A lone abandoned farmhouse in northeast Iceland. Langanes. That's the place. This was a real, edge of the earth kind of business. It was a few hundred meters from the Arctic Ocean, about 10 kilometers from the nearest sealed road, and not a single soul for miles. I was on my own and just heading up for a quick explore. I was on field work up there for other reasons. I went inside. It wasn't too messed up. Not much furniture, some things left in the kitchen, with a homemade poster saying Eyatmot 1982, a festival that celebrates the bringing of sheep before the winter, so it was abandoned at some point after that. I was about to explore the top floor when I heard a creak. I stopped and listened for a few seconds. There was nothing else. Fine. I went up 2 or 3 more steps and heard the creak again, and genuinely 2 or 3 more footsteps, or at least the sound of it. This really got the hairs on my neck up. Now logically, I knew there was essentially zero chance of anyone else being there. As I mentioned before, this is the definition of isolating, in the absolute middle of nowhere. And if you know Iceland, you know that there aren't a lot of people. And I enjoy thinking of myself as a reasonable, not easily spooked man. I went up 1 more step, then heard 2 more footsteps, and something slam onto the floor above, and I legged it. I ran back down the stairs out of the farmhouse, back into my Land Rover, and headed off down the track. I never did find out what it was, and I felt stupid, but my love of horror movies took control of my brain, and told me to run from the footsteps in the attic of an abandoned farmhouse. At least, I got a few good photos. There was an abandoned factory near a train station that recently had been torn down. A couple of years ago, when it was still standing, it was dilapidated and tagged all over. It looked nice and abandoned. After crossing the train track and hopping a few fences, we got to where the door once was. It was now a boarded up hole. We cranked our crowbars to get it off, and once we did, we found a huge open space, everything stripped, copper wiring and such. Everything dusty, and wooden bits rotted. It smelt dank and mildewy, and was so dark, and it seemed like no one had stepped in there for years. This factory was huge. We decided to pop out from wherever we had, and came to explore another side. Once myself and my 3 friends came out, we searched along the sides to find another entrance. Then, the flashlight pointed at us. Shit! The cops. Goddamn, I don't need a trespassing charge. Then, oh shit, he has a gun. I wish this was a cop, and threat of a charge. We were huddled behind a hunk of scrap, and he was bellowing for us to get out. The fear I felt at that moment was unreal. Shaking, clammy, we stepped out. He pointed this bright-ass flashlight at us. His demanding voice went from a low growl to a more frantic, pissed-off one. Who the hell are you, and what are you doing here? Do you know where you are? One of us, the calmest in our misguided Scooby gang, said confidently that we will leave and never return, and to please allow us to. He says he'll walk us out, which was less walking us out, more so blinding us with his flashlight, and directing us to jump the fences and walk away, with his gun pointed at us. Having my back turned towards this weapon-wielding man was terrifying. My option was to do what he said, and hope that he wouldn't shoot, the obvious one. But having to trust that he wouldn't mess us up while vulnerably climbing the chain link fence in the dark will always stay with me. I don't know if there were people maybe taking meth, or what was being done in that factory by its apparent occupants. It's gone now, but that memory gives me chills whenever I pass there. I have a few more instances with abandoned places, but this was the most traumatizing. On another occasion, the same group of friends and I would visit this big, multi-level building that was up in the mountains. It was supposed to be a rec center or country club, but it was stopped in the midst of construction because of the outdated and hazardous materials being used. I believe this was because of asbestos, and a building was built elsewhere, but this one remained because of financial reasons. On the drive to get there, you pass by some beautiful mountain homes, and then up a half-mile long dirt road, but without any lights on, as not to disturb the neighborhood. We would go into this concrete and metal structure late at night, breaking open glow sticks and flinging them around the rooms, and spray painting and other kid shit. We frequented it until this incident. The group that had gone there was smaller than our usual, 4 or 5, and was just me and 2 other friends. We were equipped with a lantern, a flashlight, and just going to hang out. The entrance were these huge metal doors. They were extremely heavy, and it took the 2 of us to push very hard to move them even a little bit. They were always open. Everything looked normal. Usual amounts of cigarette butts and general trash. Doors open, no other cars or anything around. Everything looked as if no one was there. We entered into a room about the size of a bedroom. That is directly to the right. This one is so dark and small compared to the vast open spaces of the lower levels. So naturally, the most fun to spray glow sticks and have glow-in-the-dark shit in. There is a comically creepy book that is a pretty old children's book sitting there. It's about Mother Goose and tells little tales that we've all heard. The illustrations are super weird looking. Anyway, who doesn't love getting scared? So one of my friends picks it up, because we're into this creepy book that we found and are probably going to keep it. We keep walking around the inside and hear squeaks and screeches. This is in the mountains, and this is an old building. Whenever we heard noises, our minds go to 2 places. It was either 1, an animal or bug, or a clanky piece of metal, as these things were heavy, or 2, we are in an abandoned place at night. Anything heard is going to be scary. We all smoked at the time, and went outside to the stairway that goes into a hole where there is a locked door, sat on the stairs, and smoked. We heard a little high-pitched scream that almost sounded like it could be from a magpie. It creeped us out, and then we began to hear rustling and some sort of soft clomping. Very rhythmic. Almost seemed to be too much for people walking. But probably there was another person here. So we decided to scope it out. We carefully walked the perimeter, but see no people, no cars, nothing indicating that someone else would be there. When we walked to the entrance, my friend jokes that the book is haunted and causing these disturbances. She says that she better give it back to the ghost so it won't get mad or something, and throws it towards the entrance. It lands, opens, and flips a couple of pages. The night was still very still, not breezy or windy, and we started to freak out. We feel a little unsettled and unsure if we should go back in. We also lost our lighter, so we only had our flashlights, as we couldn't light our lantern anymore. Then, this huge creak. One of the doors is shut. How that happened without us hearing is beyond my comprehension, as we would have definitely heard it. It's extremely loud. The other door, this heavy-ass door that is damn hard to move even one bit, is closing on its own, fairly quickly, and glides shut with a loud bang that makes us all jump. We booked it at that point, ran into the car, and never went back. It doesn't seem that scary to recount, but damn, when I think about what I saw, I feel sick. I have horrible nightmares about this place, when the outcome is much more grisly, so that doesn't help. Back in the day, my friends and I would always go up to this boarded up hospital and play in it. The only problem was that all the doors were locked and all the windows were boarded. However, there was a shed that you could climb up and jump onto a car cover thing, and there was a window that was broken where you could get in. We had been in the hospital so many times, it wasn't creepy at all anymore. Well, one day, we decided we would go explore the basement that was always flooded, and we would actually try and walk down the super dark hallway that was down there. The water was probably 4 feet deep and murky, so you couldn't see the bottom. My friends and I start walking down the stairs into the basement and are shining our flashlights down into the hallway, trying to see anything. All we can see is this thing that looked like a generator and shelves, but can't see far down into the hallway. We finally must drop the courage to begin our descent into the water, but something doesn't feel right. The water was completely motionless, and it got incredibly quiet. So quiet, in fact, I swear I could hear my friend's heartbeats. My friend puts one foot on a stair that was submerged, and then another. The water rippled as he continued his descent. Then out of nowhere, we hear a huge splash into the water somewhere nearby. The kind of splash you would hear if someone cannonballed in. We immediately bolt back up the stairs. I peek down into the darkness to see nothing, but we could definitely hear something coming down the hallway towards us. We ran all the way to the second floor and jumped off the car covering thing so fast. We waited outside for a couple of hours and heard nothing and/or no one. We ended up going back inside and sitting at the top of the stairs listening for anything or anyone, but heard nothing. The stairs were pretty dry by this point, and one of my friends got a bright idea and threw the flashlight down the stairs into the water to try and scare whatever might be down there. After the flashlight made a splash from the impact, we heard nothing, and the light disappeared into the darkness of the water. After waiting for what felt like an eternity, we again found the courage to charge down the stairs, screaming and hollering. We got to the base of the water and jumped in, shining our flashlights down the hall, making a ton of noise. Behind the generator was another hallway that was absolutely pitch black. We were standing in the water at this intersection when all of a sudden we see a large silhouette slowly moving towards us. It looked like two barrels standing next to each other atop the water. Then another huge splash behind them. They split apart and started moving towards us extremely quickly. We ran and never returned to that place. There was this abandoned hotel I was checking out. I gained access through a blown out window near the indoor pool. It smelled like death inside. And I come to find a couple of bloated dead deer in the slime collected towards the deep end of the pool. That should have been my sign to go. I make my way into the lobby and banquet areas, and come across a couple of raccoons and squirrels who scurry away swiftly. Everything is destroyed. Even the reception desk has been ripped in half. Nothing interesting to photograph, just trash. Neat little piles of trash. After a bit of searching, I find the stairwell. There's an odd noise coming from above that I brush off as rain. I decide to skip a couple of floors because they're probably in the same condition as the lobby, and a lot of the exterior windows have been blown out. I get to 4 and open the doors, not worried about the noise, as I'm confident I'm the only sober person on premise, if not the only person. As I pull the door open, the rain noise suddenly ceases, completely. I point my flashlight down the hallway to see hundreds of geese poke their head out of the guest rooms. I remember the moment when nothing moved, and we just stared at each other. It felt like it lasted several minutes, though I'm sure it was no more than 10 seconds. Here I am, in the middle of a hall of geese of an abandoned luxury hotel, staring me down. Once the initial shock of the sight wears off, I remember I'm only looking at half of the floor. Behind me, the geese aren't pulling a deer in the headlights. They're coming towards me. It was time to go. I closed the stairwell door behind me, only muffling the cacophony that erupted once I moved. As I hustled down the stairs, I realized the signs were there. Goose shit everywhere. I hit the lobby and turned towards the pool, where a group of geese has collected, as if they were trying to trap me. Luckily, they're just dumb birds, and I got out of there to find the exterior of the hotel swarming with them. There was one lone sentinel standing on the roof, honking out a shrill command that the perimeter had been breached. I should have stayed to get more pictures, but I was done. Covered in filth from a slip down the stairs, and I didn't feel like collecting fresh shit from the dive bombers circling overhead. I did, however, get the picture you see on screen.